Would like to welcome everyone to the April 27th meeting of the New Bern Board of Aldermen. The prayer tonight will be given by Alderman Barbara Best.
Good evening. Could we all take a moment for prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, I come before you again, thanking you for another day. Lord, I ask that you give me knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and give each member of this board, give them guidance. Lord, touch their mind and their heart so that when we conduct the business of this city tonight, that we will have an open mind and realize that we serve the entire city of New Bern, and that our will is to be fair, honest, and the decisions we make that will affect our citizens. Amen.
Amen. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country? I pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Bingle. Here. Alderwoman Harris. Present. Alderman Astor.
Here.
Mayor Outlaw. Here. Alderman Kinsey. Here. Alderman Best. Present. Alderman Odom.
Here.
The consent agenda.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second.
Motion and second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. Mr. Stevens, item number 8.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 8 is a public hearing on the 2021-2022 CDBG Draft Annual Action Plan. This plan serves as the city's application for funding under the Entitlement Cities Program. It provides a summary of the actions, activities, and specific federal and non-federal resources that will be used to address the priority needs and specific goals that is identified in the strategic plan section of our consolidated plan for fiscal year 21-22. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over to Amanda, and she's going to brief you real quickly on this draft annual action plan. Then, Mayor, if you will, you can open up the public hearing and then close it. Action will be taken at the next board meeting, so this will be clearly just for information and the public hearing part.
Sorry, I was looking for a different clicker. Good evening, Mayor and Board. I'm Amanda Olin-Salin, the Community and Economic Development Manager, here tonight to address the annual action plan for our community development block grant funding. Each year, we develop an annual action plan that builds on the 5-year consolidated plan that is completed. As the city manager mentioned, this is our official application for funding under the program and outlines the specific activities that we intend to complete in the upcoming year. For the 2021 year, we received $264,866,000, which is a slight increase over the 2020 program year. Just some highlights from the plan. It is a lengthy document, so as you can see, the income percentage that meets the low to moderate income level is at 40.66% for the city. Housing affordability and housing availability continue to be one of the greatest needs within our communities. As you can see, there are 1,100 households on the waiting list for vouchers from Twin Rivers Opportunities. So there have been, challenges for individuals trying to overcome the housing issues within New Bern. The city continues to coordinate within our city with nonprofit partners, other agencies, and the community at large to address the needs. We held a needs assessment on March 1st, which is kind of the first step of this planning process. And following those comments from the public and from our partner agencies, we developed the activities for this year. As you can see, housing, we are addressing the housing strategy to improve and expand the supply of affordable housing within the city, to construct and rehabilitate homes that are safe and affordable for our residents. In addition, we continue to address the community development strategy to improve public facilities, infrastructure, and public services throughout the city of New Bern. Many of the activities that we have completed over the past couple of years do build on each other to have a greater impact. In addition, per the guidance of HUD and what they like to see, we try to leverage other resources with these community development block grant funds, which we've had great success with over the past several years. The first project that we have listed is administration. We are allowed to take 20% of our annual allocation for administration, which this year will be $52,973. We will have another 2-year activity with the Redevelopment Commission of New Bern, which will build additional rental housing units within the redevelopment boundary area, which is one of the target areas for meeting the needs of our low to moderate income communities. And again, another 2-year project or multi-year activity for infrastructure improvement will address flooding, which is a main concern within the city of New Bern, for the Duffy Field Stormwater Enhancement Project. So approximately $87,000 will go to that project activity this year. Here's a general summary of the activities for this year. As you can see, general administration, housing rehabilitation, which is a partnership with the Redevelopment Commission, will be $125,000, and then flood drainage improvements going toward the Duffy Field Stormwater Enhancement Project will be just under $87,000 for our total allocation of this year. I'm happy to answer any questions, but as the city manager stated, part of our goal tonight is to hear the needs of, hear the comments from the public if anyone would want to come forward. So I will be happy to entertain any questions or clarify anything from this plan.
Questions before I open a public hearing? At this time, I'm going to open a public hearing on the 2021-22 CDBG Draft Annual Action Plan. Anybody would like to come up and ask any questions, make any comments, you're free to do that at this time.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. Under questions, comments, I know that there was, looking over the figures, I just hope that the third portion of that stays with brick and mortar and not tied up in fees and studies.
Which portion, I'm sorry?
Well, I mean, the 100 and some thousand.
The $125,000 for housing rehabilitation?
I say I'm just hoping that the $86,893 is proposed to be used toward public improvements, permitting, engineering, design, and acquisition costs. I certainly hope that a majority of the 86 gets spent on brick and mortar and not tied up on a bunch of fees.
Right. As you are aware, we are in this construction phase of phase 1 of that project to increase the size of the Biddle Street Pond, the existing pumps that discharge into Jack Smith, and the pipes that discharge into Jack Smith Creek. So construction of phase 1 is underway. This will allow us to complete the future design and engineering phases, which help us leverage those other grant and loan funds to complete the construction of the next phases. Having that project shovel ready is really important, which helped us leverage other grant funds that we've already received for the stormwater enhancement program. So it will continue to allow us to move forward with the next phases of construction.
Right. So of the 86,000, how much would actually be capital improvement, do you think?
The $86,000 will mainly go toward planning, so the design and engineering fees to have the project shovel ready.
So how do we pay, whatever they plan and shovel ready, what are we going to do then? Pay for it with the general fund or another?
We've identified other grant sources. We also applied for funds through the Division of Water Infrastructure. their SRF funds, and we received a letter with their intent to fund the project. So we already have made some positive strides to identify grant and zero or no interest, low interest or zero interest loan funds for the project.
Does the board have any questions?
So what the amount, I do, what is the amount that you have already that is in place to actually start the shovel-ready with? I think that was a question that the mayor was trying to get across.
As far as the funds for the next phase of construction of the Duffy Field project, once we complete this one, we applied for $885,000 through the Division of Water Infrastructure. You all may remember approving us to move forward with that application. So they have indicated that they intend to fund that with their green project fund. So that would be the amount that could go toward the next phases of construction.
So you have that money already in-house?
We are working with the Division of Water Infrastructure. We have not finalized that yet. They did send a preliminary letter of their intent to fund. So we are working with that agency as well as our engineering firm to provide the necessary information to move that forward in the process.
Okay.
Ms. Stevens, did you need any action on this tonight?
Oh, that'll happen at our next board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to item number 9.
It's a public hearing and consideration of the board to adopt an ordinance to annex tax parcels IDs 8-206-132 and 8-206-133. This is known as the Goshen Medical Center. They have requested the annexation of the property known as tax parcel IDs 132 and 133 of 8-206. The property is located on Dr. MLK Jr. Boulevard near Ben Quinn Elementary School. After conducting the public hearing, the board is asked to consider a request for annexation. The copy of the petition has been included along with maps and other pertinent data. Happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions? Okay, at this time, I'm going to open a public hearing and consider an ordinance to annex tax parcel 8-206-132 and 133. We're going to open a public hearing. Anybody like to come forward, make any comments, ask questions? You're free to do it at this time.
Mayor, I make a motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Motion carries.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion we adopt the ordinance to annex tax parcel IDs 8-206-132, 8-206-133.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Odom.
Alderman Odom?
Yes.
Alderman Best?
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey?
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw?
Yes.
Alderman Astor?
Yes.
Alderwoman Harris? Yes. Alderman Beagle?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 10.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 10, similar to the last one, is a public hearing and consideration of the board to adopt an ordinance to annex 3412 Old Airport Road. Ms. Barbara Fulcher has requested to annex the property that she owns at this address. The property consists of 1.29 acres. It's located in Township 7. The board approved the sewer use agreement for this property at the April 13th, 2021 meeting of the board. After conducting the public hearing, the board is asked to consider a request for annexation, and there's a copy of this petition in your packet along with maps and pertinent data. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, does the board have questions?
Just have one. Why was this the only parcel? I just think, it hasn't, that was not had been annexed. Why was it the only parcel not to have been annexed? Because it looks like all the rest of it's in the city, correct?
No, that's out.
So all of that's out. They'll be the first one in?
Properties that are on Old Airport Road, a lot of the old existing stuff is not in the city limits.
I
You
see.
have
Okay.
other areas that were added, the Evans Mill area, the Hardy Farms areas, all those different ones were added into you have some neighborhoods, Selhorn Heights on the other side, all kinds of different places.
So there's a
But
possibility that the rest of these will probably,
eventually, whenever their sewer septic systems fail and they need to connect to sewers,
That's what'll
that's
bring them.
typically when we
Okay.
get them.
all right, thank you.
Okay, on this item, we're going to have a public hearing at this time. Anybody like to come forward, ask questions, make comments about 3412 Old Airport Road being annexed? You're welcome to do it at this time.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
A motion and second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we consider adopting an ordinance to annex 3412 Old Airport Road.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there discussion?
Only that when you do this, it's a public safety nightmare when you have one house inside the city limits and the rest of them on either side are out. So it creates confusion at 3 o'clock in the morning if they're having an emergency, but hopefully the others will come on in as well.
So roll call, starting with Alderman Bingle.
Alderman Bingle?
Yes.
Alderwoman Harris? Yes. Alderman Astor? Yes. Mayor Outlaw? Yes. Alderman Kinsey? Yes. Alderman Best? Yes. Alderman Odom?
Item number 11.
Presentation of our fiscal year 21-22 budget. Each of y'all have a budget book in front of you that should cover what the proposed budget is for the 21-22 fiscal year that's upcoming, beginning in July. So I'm going to go through real quickly our PowerPoint that we typically do. Obviously, we have some very detailed work sessions where we dive a little further into the budget as needed by the board. Which on that matter, I was going to save it for my city manager comments, but I'll go ahead and say that. Being that we are doing the renovations at City Hall, the board will need to take some action to find an alternate location to have these budget meetings. We did inquire about the use of development services, but they have planning and zoning and some HPC meetings there already. So I asked Foster about the West New Bern Recreation Center, and that facility is available for us to have the budget meetings on the 4th and 5th at our scheduled time of 4 p.m. is when we had planned to start. Now, if the board wishes to change that time, change the dates, any of that stuff, we obviously can look at alternative locations, but I just wanted to kind of do the homework beforehand to give you that option if you wanted to have it at West New Bern Recreation Center. But the board will need to call for those meetings and the location and time as well. But I'll go ahead and go through the budget real quickly. As we always do, the intent of the budget overview that you're going to get tonight in this PowerPoint is to look at the overview of our methodology and how we formulate this budget, the highlights of the proposed budget as it's before you tonight, the historic trends that we see, along with board considerations and conclusions and comments. Happy to answer any kind of questions that the board may have. We have an executive budget committee that we use. We take the direction from the board at retreats and other board meetings and discussions that we have. We try to formulate this budget to be within the realm of reality with what our revenues are. Sometimes it gets a little bit difficult. I will say this year we were presented expenditures $10.5 million over what our revenues were. So obviously that calls for a very large butcher knife for us to do some cutting, and then eventually we get down to some precision cutting to get us down to where the budget needs to be. We had 26 position requests in this budget, and as you'll see, some of the positions were approved, some of them weren't. The budget team that you have, myself, the city manager, Mary Hogan, our director of finance, Sonia Hayes, our director of human resources, and Kim Ostrom, our accounting manager. She is very instrumental, and Kim's here, and y'all make sure and give her a big clap and put in this budget, because you're going to see it's a completely different looking budget. It's very, I think, cutting edge, looks a lot better, provides a lot more detail, makes it a little bit more concise. So hopefully you will find it much easier for us to use during this budget process. Departments obviously were asked to submit their budgets, identify deficiencies in their operating accounts. Capital projects were heavily vetted. As I said, we had a huge expenditure request over what our revenues allowed. Our revenues did come in positive. Revenues due to sales tax were surprisingly high in 2021, and they were projected to be a little bit higher this upcoming year, which was nice. This is very helpful considering the COVID-19 impacts that we've recognized, and as you know, our city fared quite well during that in comparison to others. Some of our large urban areas, municipalities such as Charlotte and Raleigh and some of the Durham, some of those places have seen significant decreases in their sales tax revenues, but fortunately we weren't a part of that. Our ad valorem taxes continue to increase some due to what y'all have probably seen as the larger residential growth within the city. This budget proposes a property tax rate to remain at 48.22 cents per 100 evaluation. The alignment with the Board of Aldermen strategic goals and objectives is another mission that we had with this budget, and that's obviously, this is going way back to some of the strategic goals and objectives, which is the Redevelopment Commission. I'll just kind of give you all a quick update. We formed that, work's ongoing. Development Services continues daily work with that, and there are some provisions in the budget you'll see in the budget message if you read that, some of the things that we're doing with the Redevelopment Commission to make the city better. Community rating system, we've completed that. Invest in our staff, we've accomplished that each year through COLAs and merit raises. That's included in this fiscal year as well. We've maintained our fiscal responsibility. I'd say we completed that. We've got no tax rate increases. We've got no rate utility increases. And we've held steady with where everything's at, and we've continued to grow ourselves both from an economic development standpoint and from a revenue generating standpoint here at the city. We've invested in our city infrastructure, multiple large investments. We've had $10.5 million of resurfacing over the past 6 years, 5 to 6 years. That's a huge investment into our infrastructure. One of our most valuable assets that the city has is its street system. Whether you want to consider it an asset or not, it will be when it comes election time if you don't have nice streets to ride on. So $10.5 million of investment over that period of time is pretty significant, along with roadway widening projects and other things. We also promoted our economic development. We've added staff to support our timeliness that's proposed in this budget, continued residential and commercial development that we're seeing citywide. We're looking at citywide resiliency to provide ourselves resiliency from impacts due to hurricanes so that our economy isn't slowed down as much whenever we have another hurricane or a disaster event. And then obviously we're support for our Redevelopment Commission again. With regards to personnel, it's one of our largest line items in the budget and is a significant line item in very many of the general fund budgets such as police and fire and finance department. They usually don't have a tremendous amount of operating budgets, really a lot of personnel. But this year we had 26 position requests. We've increased in this budget, we're looking at 6 positions. Most of them regarding support stuff, and a lot of this is due to growth. The senior IT technician, we have a tremendous amount. Each of y'all are using electronic devices. Our employees, 480 strong, basically almost all of them now have email addresses. They almost all work with some kind of electronic device, computers, iPads, out in the field, whatever it may be. And the need for IT and IT-related infrastructure and programming is very critical to the continued success of the organization. Nuisance abatement officer, that position is going to be affiliated and associated with our stuff in the Redevelopment Commission and making sure that the mission that you have charged the Redevelopment Commission with will be successful. And in doing so, it's necessary for you to have nuisance abatement officers to be able to enforce those things and stay on those, especially when it comes to the internal housing evaluations that we've had that the board approved not too long ago by doing inspections internally in the houses as well as externally. GIS technician, GIS is becoming a very common use of almost all of our departments. Fire uses it, police uses it, development services use it, public works uses it, basically electric department, all of our utilities, almost everybody uses GIS. Alice is a fantastic asset to the city, as you know, but she's the only asset that the general fund has. Sewer and water has one person. The police department has one that's partially funded through 911 or almost fully funded through 911 that does 911 related mapping issues. And then you've got someone in the electric department as well, but for the most part, Alice serves as the liaison and manages this entire program and for every single department within the city. So she needs some assistance there and has for some time. So we're hoping that she will be able to provide some additional resources and guidance with GIS in the future by having this technician person take some of that load off of her. Parks maintenance specialist, maintenance construction worker, those are Parks Rec and Public Works positions, and then the police sergeant. As you recall, the board elected to move away from school resource officers and hand that back to the sheriff. This budget does include keeping those police officers in position so that they're still continue to be employed by the city. What you'll see is a reduction on the revenue side. They've always been in the expenditure, they've always been in the employee count, but on the revenue side of things, we're going to lose that funding stream as the contractual obligation with the school system is no longer there. So what the police department has proposed is putting together what is called Team 5. They have 4 teams now. They're going to put together a Team 5, and that Team 5 will need a sergeant to oversee them. So that's what this sergeant position here will be, and then that will provide us another resource as far as our policing within the community, and that'll be full-time rather than just summertime periods whenever obviously we had them for different programming, but the other times they were in the school systems. FY22 budget proposes a 1.4% cost of living adjustment. That's based on the CPI that we typically have proposed in this, as well as up to a 2.1% merit increase, and that'll be based on performance. The performance evaluations have already been done. They were due back in January, and they will these merit increases will be subject to where they fall in that merit raise. I guess, bell curve, and then at that point you will get the raise that's where you specifically fall within the bell curve. So here's kind of an overview of the recommended budget highlights as far as personnel. 480.5, that represents the 6 new positions, as you see, from 474.5 last year to 480.5 this year. Pretty much all of those in the general fund. There were some requests in the water, sewer, and electric funds to increase, I guess, the grades of certain positions within those organizations, but those did not require any major budget adjustments or any kind of additional positions within their organizations. Public safety, we've got 8 new police vehicles and 1 fire marshal vehicle that's included into our budget. One big thing you're seeing, it's probably going to be very important for us moving forward in the future with all the different things that are going around in this world and this nation specifically. We've got 60 body-worn cameras and taser technology that's included in the budget here. The taser technology meaning that once a taser is taken out, or if the gun is unholstered, they automatically will start the camera. Typically, what I understand now with the new policy that Chief Gallagher wants to implement is if this is a police-related call, then that body-worn camera should be on, period, regardless of whether they've unholstered something or not. But if they're performing a police-related stop or a police-related activity, then that body-worn camera should be on. We also have 2 thermal imaging cameras for the for the fire department, as well as the Knox box system replacements throughout the city. If you don't know what Knox box systems are, those are the quick access boxes that are on most commercial businesses so that they can limit the amount of damage that they may do to a building and gain access to the building so that they can check for fire-related issues. City Hall has one. Almost every commercial business that you'll see, if you look closely, has a Knox box that has a key that is available to the police department. They have a master key. They get that key, they can open it up, and then they can have access to the buildings. Continued education and training, obviously, for our public safety is critical, so that's been funded in this budget as well. Parks and Recreation, we have a purchase of a lot of different equipment. Obviously, a good bit of that associated with the Martin Marietta Park. It's a huge mission moving forward, huge vision, and we're going to continue to do that. Grounds equipment with 2 mowers, a dump trailer, some vehicles, obviously some Union Point upgrades that Foster's got plans for. Glen Burnie Park paving project, there's a significant amount of the paving infrastructure over there in that park that's starting to fail to the point to where it needs to be resurfaced and replaced. And then some park shelters being built at Monk Mallard Park and Fort Totten Parks as well is included in this budget. Our enterprise funds, we have stable, unchanged utility rates. Obviously, as you know, we've reduced those rates over and over back, between 7 to 4 years ago. We had some pretty significant reductions. We're projecting those to remain stable until about 2025. 2025, we're probably going to see a significant drop as the debt rolls off from the defeasance of the debt from the sale of the assets with Nakempa. So at that point, the board's got some decisions to make. It would probably be advisable for some of that to be reinvested into the capital of the infrastructure that Charlie's got some plans for, as well as potentially looking at passing along some of that as rate reduction to the citizens. However, all that stuff needs to be evaluated, and we're still 4 years away from the 2025 budget, so we'll look at that a little bit closer a little later. Obviously, different construction projects, continued improvements in the West New Bern area, electric metering equipment, substation maintenance, all of those replacements of vehicles and equipment within each of those organizations. And as I already mentioned, Jordan and Charlie both, they had budgeted for some specific grade-related changes as far as personnel to increase in their different divisions. Other city improvements, City Hall elevator project, $3 million is in this budget for design and construction. Obviously, you know where we are. As you can see, I've kind of put that hot off the press. You can kind of see a little bit of a concept there of what City Hall Annex elevator is going to look like. That's kind of gives you a little bit of a visual of what MBF's currently looking at as far as the design. Obviously, it's still got a ways to go, but I wanted to provide you a little bit of insight into that. That will provide ADA accessibility to 3 of the floors in the City Hall, both the first floor where administration is, and then the second floor where our boardroom and mayor's and board offices are going to be, and then the third floor where IT is at. Have a continued focus on projects that we begun in prior years, which is the support of the Redevelopment Commission, the Volt Center, the Martin Marietta Park, Stanley White Recreation Center, and our FEMA ditch projects. Those last 2, obviously, we already have pretty much obligated funds for, but we still have a lot of work to do, and we have to front that money up front, and those projects will be big until the point to where we're reimbursed. But our staff is working very diligently with making sure that we stay abreast of those and on top of those so that we can get that funding back. Transportation, we've got about $400,000 budgeted, and as I mentioned earlier, $10.5 million since 2015 in resurfacing and roadway construction projects, $250,000 in this budget for sidewalk improvement. We've updated we also will be updating our sidewalk and pedestrian plan. Mr. Ruggieri is going to be leading the charge on that. A small paving machine has been included. That's going to help us reduce contractor costs for these smaller paving projects that we've got throughout the city. Oftentimes they're utility cuts, or they're something that's a little bit bigger than guys getting behind a truck and shoveling with shovels, putting asphalt in place and then running over it. So if we can eliminate some of those where we get charged exorbitant amounts of money to do smaller patch projects, then that's going to be beneficial for our Public Works Department, help defer some costs for the city so that we can use that on other things. Vehicles and equipment, we've got several different things, some traffic control boxes. Those control our signalized intersections, as well as some vehicle replacements and dump trucks. This right here kind of gives you an overview of where we are with all of our different funds. As you see, electric's our largest one at $55 million, but about $38 million. Is that close, Charlie? Depending on how we budget, 35 to 38, depends on the season, I guess, if you want to call it that. A lot of that is just a bill that we get from NCAMPA for power consumption. The rest of those you can kind of see. We've got the sewer fund, the water fund, general fund, employee benefit, insurance fund, which is always another thing. I will say, Mary made a very big point, as well as myself, in this year providing some funds into what we want to do is with the leftover funds and savings that we have in this year, is to start funding a little bit of our OPEB liability that we have. Obviously, that's been a big issue. The mayor, you've mentioned that numerous times over the course of the 10 years that I've been here, probably 7 pretty much as a manager, is our OPEB liability issues. And it is our hopes that at the end of the year, we're going to bring before the board here very soon a policy that will allow us to take some of this percentage of leftover money of the end of the year and start funding in some way the OPEB liability. So it's our hopes that at the end of this fiscal year, you'll also be able to do that, and then that way we can start removing a little bit of that liability. But this kind of gives you an idea of all the different funds that we have, and that was something that was kind of born out of these budget meetings of where we stand, where we plan on ending the budget year, and then where we are going with this next budget year so that we hopefully can start funding that. Here's kind of everything in a nutshell, all of our different funds. This budget, you're looking at about $133 million total. Keep in mind when you think, oh gosh, that's a huge number, keep in mind that $133 million versus the last year's adopted of 127, includes a $3 million City Hall elevator project. So take that $3 million out, and you're down to $130 million, and that's probably a little bit closer to where we should be. As we see, we've got some increases in the electric, we've got some increases in the general fund. A lot of that can be capital expenditure, and that varies from year to year as far as our capital expenditures, what we have. Some of it is the personnel request and operating. As you can see here, this is kind of gives you an idea. Take the $41.925 million and take out $3 million for a for the City Hall elevator project. That puts you at 38.9. You're only a million more, basically, $1.5 million more than where you were the year before.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the silt removal with the FEMA, how would you classify that as a project? And the money, the amount of money that has been put into that, once the project has been completed, what type of manpower do you think we're going to need to maintain that once it's completed? I didn't hear anything about that in the budget. Are we looking?
Sir, that's a fantastic question, and one that the board will probably need to entertain once all this stormwater work is complete. I will tell you, we had a stormwater fund that's been eliminated and now absorbed into the general fund. Right now we have a policy that's in place. If the board wishes to go differ from that policy and they want to make sure that we never get in that place again, we're going to need to put in personnel, I can tell you that. There's the maintenance construction worker, I believe, George, was that intended somewhat for the stormwater department, kind of flex between stormwater and streets, I believe? But that's one position. I will say, we did hear some beneficial news. Mr. Cox, David Cox, that typically runs our inmate program, was contacted by the state corrections system, and they are looking to begin the inmate programs again as far as trying to get them in here. Now, what we've got to work with them on, and I know Sonia's been working with this and looking at it, is how are we going to manage the COVID-19 related stuff. So hopefully that's going to get people in here as well to assist us with continued maintenance, because we haven't had them for, well, ever since the start of the COVID process, we haven't had them. And that was 13, I think, was typically what we were getting citywide. We had a couple in Parks and Rec, we had a couple in Public Works. So we had some in Stormwater, we had quite a few. So obviously that helps. They're $1 a day versus, you know, $35,000 a year. So it definitely helps out in that regard.
What you're saying is once the program is wrapped up, we'll start to looking at how many crews that it would take to maintain the ditches. How many miles is it again that we are looking at that's being cleaned right now?
About 69, 67, 69.
69 miles.
Let's call it somewhere in the upper 60s, yep, of miles of ditches.
The reason why I brought that up, because we're doing the budget now, and I don't know, once that's completed, would we be able to pull from here? We'll be able to pull from the other resources of money to start to looking at that. Because, you know, we were like 100 years behind, and now we're catching up. So I was just trying to be proactive.
Absolutely understand. And that's, again, it's something that the board needs to consider as far as what its desires are and what its direction to staff is with regards to continuance of the maintenance of this system once it is restored back to its pre-disaster conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question. That was a good question. But with the $36 million or whatever it ended up being that's obligated, if it comes in under that, which I've been told that it's possibly going to come in quite a bit under that, could we not can't we apply for that money for capital improvements and hire someone to continue for a few years? Would that?
I think that's a question you probably need to request from Corey. Just because the money's been obligated doesn't mean that we're getting $32 million. If it costs $10 million to do, and it was obligated with $32 million. It was based on an estimate. So unless FEMA approves that through some program that Corey identifies, which is our FEMA consultant, I'm not sure whether that's possible or not. But that's, like I said, I'm not the expert in that field, but I'm not aware of one to where there's a program where we could employ and hire people to continue to maintain this until the 32 million's run out. I don't know of that program.
They actually do allow that, and under capital facts, we're getting ready to try to do something like that. But it's worth looking into. So we probably need to talk to Corey about it.
George, to the podium, please.
First night, you put him in the hot seat.
When we was out watching a lot of the silt remover from the ditches and talking with the consultant, is he still planning on writing up a report based on what the needs will be for the future of maintaining the ditches?
At this time, his task orders with our contractor just looking at repairs or remediation of the Florence damage. They have not been given a contract to provide any of that additional future maintenance of what has been completed at the end of the game.
What was those things that you was telling me about that was catching the water that was in the center? It was
The
like-
check dams, the stone check dams.
Oh, okay. We're still having that young man to go out and check on daily to remove the debris.
Yes, the stone check dams are required in our sedimentation and erosion control permits. We have to leave them in until the vegetation's been reestablished on the banks of the ditches that we've worked in. So once the grass has been established, then we'll have the contractor, we hold retainage on that, so they'll have to go back, and then those are the final items they'll pull out of the basins they worked in.
Thank you, sir.
I don't know if you can hear me.
I
Can you let the public know kind of how the process is in regards to how they're getting categorized for being cleaned out? Because some communities feel like they're getting overlooked, and I try to explain that I know it's going to be like a 3-year long type of process because of how much mile we have to clean out, but maybe them hearing you kind of explain
Correct.
who goes first, who's next, kind of how
The
that
contracts right now, we have got contractors working in nearly all of the basins. The North Glen Burnie, Rennie's Creek, and Riverfront basins were 3 small basins grouped together. The contractor has finished with all but waiting for the vegetation or the grass to reseed on the banks they've worked in to have that signed off as complete. Jack Smith Creek is currently being worked on right now. Bryce's Creek and Wilson Creek, there's a contractor in that area. The Trent Basin, there's another contractor working in that area, and we will release Jimmy's to them once they wanted to get several weeks into this so they can then move additional crews onto Jimmy's, so we'll release that contract. So all the basins will have contractors in them or have been in them. The work that the areas that they are working on, it's what was identified as related damage or sediment from Hurricane Florence. Mm-hmm. So if you see them go through a neighborhood and they do a portion of a ditch, this is what was identified by our consultants as something they could certify as Florence-related damage. And so if you see a section skipped, it may not have had Florence damage that was identified. So in their manuals or project manuals, each place is specifically identified. Down trees, vegetation, debris that's in the ditch, additional accumulation of sediment, that's all identified in that. Now take into account, this is just the Cat A work. This is just the vegetation and sedimentation removal out of the ditches. We have additional contracts that will be let for all of the basins that will be Cat D, which is for permanent work such as bank stabilization and head wall stabilization. That will go through every one of the basins again. And as we're seeing some of this, our numbers, our total cost for each basin on the Cat A coming in a little bit less than what was anticipated or estimated, We're going to go back and look at additional Cat A work that can be done in those basins and include that in the Cat D contract. So these next round of contracts will initially start as Cat D, but we're going to include additional Cat A that can be provided as coverage for Florence damage.
So every ditch will be touched?
Not every ditch. Every ditch that was identified as having sediment or debris that was related to Hurricane Florence.
Okay, so I guess that was a misunderstanding. So are we going to be allocating funds to do the remainder of the ditches? Because I was under the impression that this funding was going to cover every single ditch in the city of New Bern.
80 miles.
And, now that it's specific to, Florence, obviously, we need to figure about allocating money to go ahead and get all of the ditches fixed and cleaned out so that moving forward, we're maintaining it and that's being proactive. Because a lot of people were under the assumption that it was going to cover everything, $32 million. I would assume that they would cover every single ditch and mile in the city.
Well,
Here is that the $32 million was an estimate, okay? And the 80-plus miles of ditches was an estimate. And all of that has to be validated. FEMA actually sends people out there, along with the engineers, Draper Aiden, Danny Meadows sitting out there, a faithful follower of our board meetings and employee of the city. They walked every mile of these. If we can't justify and prove that it was Florence-related damage that's in that ditch, we can't do anything with it. So therefore, that removes that amount of linear footage or square footage or whatever from it. So we have to prove that, just like we have to prove that a damage related to a city hall or the BP building or the Stanley White Recreation Center was the result of Hurricane Florence, not some other storm, not a windstorm that came 10 years ago, whatever. It has to be as a result. And they go to the length of pulling up Google pictures, aerial maps, all kinds of different stuff to prove whether or not it was a valid expense due to FEMA, for FEMA to fund it. So that's the reason why, yes, if we said that it's $32 million and we're going to look at every single, we're going to look at doing every single ditch in the city, yes, we didn't. There's complete truth to that statement. What gets validated by FEMA as damage due to Hurricane Florence is a different story. And otherwise, you got to come out of your own pocket to pay for any other additional proof because they're not going to pay for it. They won't fund it. And then, quite frankly, if you do anything outside of that, they could potentially pull your funding for the rest of this stuff. So.
Explain to Alderman Harris, like you explained to me, the ditch that was on Glen Burnie Road that was stopped up, where you was telling me that you had to go in to clean that up, to where when the contractor go in, which was damaged by FEMA, you didn't explain that to her the way you did me, how you offset that. You remember the one at the trailer park there that the contractor came in to clean up at the end?
Yes.
I think maybe about 500 yards, and you was explaining to me how you came in to get the water to flow.
Right, and in some of these areas, what we're looking at is we're trying to hit the main drainage basin ditches. You'll see a lot of ditches that are private ditches that the city does not maintain, has never maintained. These may be backyard ditches or lateral ditches. There's some ditches that pick up city water that we will need to go back in that may not have been identified in the FEMA work, but city staff will have to go back and address. But one of the advantages to this is once the contractors have been into the basin, they've also provided an access road into where they stop their work. So then that leads us to a better point for us to get beyond that point for areas that weren't certified as Florence damage. So it's providing opportunities to us beyond just what you're seeing the contractors dig right now.
My added question would be, seeing as how we are under dealing with FEMA, if there are ditches that need to be taken care of, we're hesitant on doing that because it could affect the FEMA money coming in, So is that kind of put in limbo until this?
We have not bid the Cat D work. So we have an opportunity to go back and look at some additional portions of the ditches that you may have seen that may have skipped over or weren't included, that we may be able to include as Cat A Florence damage. And that's what we're going to go back and do, and look at the opportunity while we have the contractors back in the basins to see if we can pick up some more of that A work, which is mainly sediment. There was very little big debris items that were not included. I think it's mainly going to be sediment we're going to be able to look at.
Okay, thank you.
Continue on. We have waterfront revenue expenditure trends. As you can see, each of the ones that we have kind of, and again, variations depend a lot in these funds depending on where we are with our expenditures, and a lot of it has to do with capital. So you'll see an increase in the water fund revenues, sewers up slightly as well, about 700,000. Sewer, we have buying a vac truck. A vac truck is a very significant amount of expense, so that's a capital item that's in the sewer fund that budget this year. Electric fund staying pretty steady. As you see, obviously our downward trend is more reflective of our significant decreases as far as rates that we've had over the time. What we'll probably see is, again, 2025, you'll see that thing dip down a little bit further, which is going to be fantastic. It's going to put us in a great position for rates and our system maintenance and improvements for the years to come. Just as a ad valorem tax rate comparison, this kind of gives you an idea as far as New Bern's valuation. I think that valuation went up about $200 million, is that right, Mary, roughly, this year for the city of New Bern. As it shows, our tax rates are the lowest among many of our peers. I obviously don't include every single one of them, but of the large municipalities in eastern North Carolina, you can see that we are the lowest as far as our tax rate. And our collection rate, again, is fantastic. County handles that for us. We're almost 99% there. And our total estimated ad valorem annual tax revenues, about $16 million. So in conclusion, we've got a balanced budget. We did increase 6 employees. Obviously, there was a significant amount of employee requests this year as well as last year. Last year had a significant amount. We brought that to the board, or we said we would reevaluate those mid-year. We did that. There was no action by the board to add those employees at that time, so those same requests come again this year with more. So obviously, we've got about 6 included in the budget this year. COLA and merit-based increases for our employees. Let me tell you right now, it is critical to take care of the employees you got, because there's so many industries in our area and in this nation that are struggling to find employees. I think Ms. Bingle's probably one that will vouch for that. Every restaurant in downtown or any other place that you go right now in the city of New Bern has signs saying they're hiring. So I would highly encourage that the city continue to take care of their employees and value their most valuable asset that we have of our entire budget, which is our human capital. Because once you lose them, you probably won't get them back. Right now, those who are unemployed find it more lucrative for them to stay at home unemployed than it is for them to go find a job. So that's the reason why we looked at COLA and merit-based increases this year as well. We want to maintain our high level of service. We'll continue to do that. And obviously, we have execution of multiple projects, such as our City Hall elevator included in the budget. Stable utility rates, continuing our focus on replenishing our coffers due to Hurricane Florence. We're closing out projects. We're continuing to get funds back with FEMA. We've actually just got recently, I think, of Hurricane Isaias. We got some funds back for that. Ladies over there are shaking their heads, so I know that we're getting checks back on that one as well. Obviously, and with better financial positions, you may want to look as pay-as-you-go approach. I'm always going to tell you that, because if you got the cash to pay for it, it's better to do that than go out and pay interest on loans. But obviously, I understand we've got a pretty significant amount of capital that we have to purchase each and every year. And our staff always stand prepared to be ready for economic growth in New Bern. I think it's critical, especially as you've seen in some of these position requests, that we be ready from an inspection standpoint. We did last year, as well as nuisance abatement with the Redevelopment Commission. Lots of different work coming out here, IT, so forth and so on. So Upcoming workshops on the 4th and 5th of May. Obviously, the board still needs to take that direction. We've got a public hearing that we proposed on May the 11th. That can be pushed if the board wants to do so. Budget adoption for the 25th. That can be pushed if we need to do the public hearing on another date. Other workshops can be scheduled at the board's desire, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments. Real quick, before we do that, I did want to go back and highlight the work that staff has done. We have included the departmental requests and the amounts that each one of the departments requested, what was funded. It's in your tab right here in the front. We also included the 5-year capital plan of the board of the city from all the different departments, so you can see what was included in the budget and what's included or what's planned for the next fiscal years. And as you'll see, this budget, it includes, the city manager's message. It includes the organizational chart, the classification plan. We kind of broke things down into different tabs. You've got the staffing position requests. You've got the travel and training all lumped together so you can see what each department's requesting in that. Capital expenditures by department, you can see that as well. And then the fee schedule. The fee schedule is included in this budget. Obviously, that will need to be adopted as well whenever we look at adopting the budget. And then it goes by each department, and they all have kind of a different little, a little bit of a different look. We switched to landscape because it makes it easier to view, but you can go line item by line item and look at the specific departments as far as the detail within those different divisions of the departments. And other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't know that the meeting on the 4th and 5th at 4 o'clock is conducive to Alderman Harris's schedule, so we may want to discuss that and find a more amenable time where we can all gather.
I serve the pleasure of the board, and whatever y'all want to do. The 4th and the 5th was identified and
What
adopted
works
in the
best for
roster
you?
schedule.
Not till 6.
And I would appreciate if you can honor that, because the last time I took off, we didn't follow through with that meeting, and
Understood.
it costs. So, and usually I probably end up only needing 1 day, but I know we do 2. Because or do we need to follow up with the workshop we were supposed to have with Mary when she was supposed to explain?
I think that was for bond. That workshop was supposed to be about bond, correct? Or just about
Yeah,
doing a
that's
bond.
for,
It wasn't
for
about this.
large-scale capital projects, if the board wished to move forward with those. Right now, our borrowing capacity is around $6 million. If you wanted to look at tax rate increases, you could look at borrowing more for 15 years. I think we looked at a 15-year option. It was $6.5 million, $10.4 million, and like 15 or so million roughly. I'm talking big numbers there for 0, 1, and 2 cents on the tax rate.
Which actually does matter, because if we decide to raise taxes, it's in the budget. Don't we raise within the budget?
Yeah, I don't know, if we could get a bond ready for this year, could we?
Excuse me?
Could we get a bond ready for this year so that we would have
You
to
can do a
raise the
bond.
taxes?
You can do a bond at any time. You can do a budget amendment at any time. So
At
you
any
can-
time, so,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, what you would want to do is align your revenues. If it's going to be related to a tax rate increase, then that's one thing. But a general obligation bond that requires a tax rate increase would typically be one that is put out for vote, unless you're just going to do it to create the revenue to do it in some other way.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, all the staff came together to meet. We need to honor that and at least listen to what was going on. I think 6 o'clock this time around would be great, because, communities can come and
In the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. It's very good.
6 o'clock PM, so that, community could come in and hear what's going on with the budget as well. So. if you-
6 a.m.
6 PM. 5:30. I
Y'all
can
fight
vote.
it out, just tell me when, either time will work. So that would be a week from today, Tuesday, the 4th.
You can do 5:30
A.m.
PM.
Why are you doing me like this?
Well, it's 2 hours earlier, so just make the
Mayor,
motion.
I'd like to make a motion, we call for 2 budget workshops on May 4th and May 5th at 5:30 PM at Westminster Recreation Center.
Second.
Motion and second. Their discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Motion carries.
That's all I have, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Item number 12 is a resolution. Sorry. Oh. Thank you. Thank those ladies over there. They did a fantastic job. They worked really hard on this, and Kim, I know, worked many late nights on that, so she deserves a lot of credit for it. I was just an axe man. Item number 12, Board, is a resolution authorizing the sale of 1213 Mechanic Street by the Redevelopment Commission of the City of New Bern. The Redevelopment Commission desires to sell this property that's located at the subject address to the adjoining property owner. They desire to utilize the parcel to expand and enhance their outdoor space. It's a relatively small lot. The property is not suitable for development by the Commission because it's in the 100-year floodplain as well. It's requested that the Board consider approval of this sale. There's a memo in your packet from Mr. Ruggieri, and happy to answer any questions.
Any additional questions? I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of 1213 Mechanic Street by the
Redevelopment Commission of the City of New Bern.
Yes.
Question for we conveyed all these properties to the Redevelopment Commission. Can you explain why they're coming back to us for approval?
The statute requires, the statute requires that the board approve sales of property once it's in the hands of the Redevelopment Commission to find that the sale is consistent with the redevelopment plan that you approved.
Anything else at this time? Roll call starting with Alderman Odom.
Alderman Odom.
Yes.
Alderman Best.
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey.
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw.
Yes.
Alderman Astor.
Yes.
Alderwoman Harris.
Yes.
Alderman Bingle.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 13.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the Board, item number 13 is a resolution to recommend a strategic buyout program zones to the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency Strategic Buyout Program. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Olin Salen as she's going to detail this a little bit further. I know that y'all have met with staff in small groups to discuss this moving forward, so tonight it's before you in a formal resolution.
Good evening again, Mayor and Board. We were contacted, the City of New Bern was contacted by the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency that they intend to start the Rebuild North Carolina Strategic Buyout Program within our jurisdiction. This program has similarities to the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program that is operated through FEMA. However, this is funded through HUD, so it is funded through CDBG Mitigation and Disaster Recovery Program funds. The NCOR has an action plan that they have outlined as far as how this program would operate, and they asked the city to propose different buyout zones. It is a voluntary program, and only eligible properties within those zones will be considered as applicants. Our development services staff consulted with Public Works to identify areas that are prone to future flooding events from either, regular floods or from hurricanes. And we have identified 4 potential buyout zones. If you all elect to proceed, those would be submitted to the NCOR policy team for further review and consideration, which would then result in a cooperative agreement between the City of New Bern and NCOR. The program differs from HMGP in that NCOR will basically operate this program start to finish. So each applicant will be assigned a case manager, and all intake and everything through demolition will be handled by the state. Ultimately, it'll be similar to the HMGP program. The city will own those properties in perpetuity to have those as green spaces, so no future development can occur. But it is different because the proposed buyout zone could result in some mitigation to further reduce the flooding risk for the community at large. In addition, there are some incentives that are available to applicants and eligible property owners in the buyout zone, so they could receive Additional cash incentives are things like down payment assistance, rental assistance, if they're a renter that rents in one of these properties. And the state plans to roll this out in phases. So owner-occupied properties will be eligible, rental properties will be eligible, and even potentially commercial properties could be eligible in future phases. So it is a long-term program where NCOR will be doing that outreach to the community, holding public meetings, and contacting those property owners individually. But at this time, we are proposing the 4 zones that are outlined on the maps that you have included in your packets. And that will be sent to the state, and then they would come back with a cooperative agreement that would include the properties that they deem to move forward with.
As it currently is,
Say, for instance, we have some residents that may be within this 4 areas for buyout, but they have not actually submitted an application. Is it too late? Are they still accepting applications or what?
This is a completely separate program
Okay.
from any other programs that are being operated currently. So this program has not yet started.
Okay.
Once those buyout zones are designated and once the cooperative agreement is signed, then the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency and the Rebuild Program will reach out directly to those property owners and the people living at those addresses.
Gotcha.
So it's not the same as any other application that property owners may have completed in the past.
Okay.
This will be a new program.
So if I live within one of those 4 zones, then someone from NCOR or Rebuild North Carolina will contact me based on the information that's submitted in from the city.
Correct, correct. So if you, they will be contacting the property owners as well as the individuals living in the homes if it's a renter-occupied property.
in that area needs to agree to it when they go and seek out and speak to the public. So if there's one homeowner that's like, no, I don't want to be bought out, does that hinder the process?
It is still a voluntary program, so owners, property owners would still have to elect to participate. The NCOR intends to have long-range outreach to, share the advantages of the program and encourage individuals to find safe and sanitary housing outside of the floodplain. But it is still a voluntary program like the other buyout programs.
For community members that are listening, if this is the pleasure of the board to move forward and individuals want to support this, when it comes to the future, when everything is demolished, is it just going to be grass? What's the vision of these locations? Because they're scattered throughout the city, and that's a lot of land that's just going to be out there. So are we going to make them like green spaces, how you're doing with the waterway in Duffyfield?
Right. So potentially in working and discussing with Public Works, many of these homes are repetitive lost properties and in smaller neighborhoods that could be turned back into green spaces or potentially become some kind of mitigation project. The goal would be to have 100% participation. So, roadways could be abandoned and it truly could be, turned back to a natural state, which could help, potentially in many of these areas, help with retention or mitigation of surrounding homes and other portions of the city. So that would be the ultimate goal, is to put it back to its natural state, which will help build community resilience and meet many of our other goals that we are currently working on throughout the city.
The last question is, and there's not a program within this where it could potentially help the homeowners with actually mitigating, like raising their property to kind of, even though they're in the flood zone, but if it's raised, kind of like how, unfortunately, the individuals that lost their homes kind of in the downtown area over where that water was and stuff, I know some of them have raised them. Is that an option for any of these homeowners in these areas?
These areas would be specifically targeted for buyout, for acquisition. So there would not be the option through this program for any kind of elevation or other mitigation of those individual homes. That's why smaller areas have been determined where, acquisition would be beneficial to the surrounding area.
Thank you so much for the information.
In one of the buyout
Zones, if you have residents that do not want to participate in that buyout program, and they want to stay there, and they elevate their home, but other homes around them are being bought out. So if another hurricane comes through and the area that the individual stayed in, the homes are elevated, another hurricane comes through, will they qualify for FEMA funding because it's a buyout zone and they elected to stay there and elevate their home?
I don't necessarily know that answer. These are CDBG funds versus FEMA funds, so they do work together as federal programs, but I don't think it necessarily disqualifies anyone. Now, I mean, of course, plans and policies could change in the future, but this doesn't necessarily prohibit being within a designated buyout zone under this strategic buyout program of NCORS, does not necessarily disqualify anyone from, participating in other programs or elevation programs. Again, it is completely voluntary.
I'm assuming that this information will be disclosed to these individuals within these buyout zones from NCORS? Okay.
And as I stated earlier, from intake, from the point of application, when these homeowners would be contacted, they will be assigned a case manager that can really go over all of the pros and cons of what the long-term benefits and risk are. That program also includes things like housing counseling and, other things to make sure that homeowners are well informed of what their risk is, to help ensure that they're taking the necessary steps to mitigate future losses.
Thought process is, I am going to make a motion and support this because I want the communities to have the ability to speak to the state and get the information and be engaged with the public, and for them to be able to make the decision to have their home bought out and move forward. I'm not making it based on this is something that I feel we should do, but I want the community, these areas, to have the right to discuss whether they want to be bought out or not. So with that said, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution to recommend strategic buyout program zones to the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resilience Strategic Buyout Program.
Motion and second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Bingle.
Alderman Bingle? Yes. Alderwoman Harris? Yes. Alderman Astor? Yes. Mayor Outlaw? Yes. Alderman Kinsey? Yes. Alderman Best? Yes. Alderman Odom?
Yes.
14.
14 is a resolution accepting ownership and maintenance of Arbor Greenway. The city received a request to accept this ownership and maintenance. The Public Works has performed a built-to-standards inspection and confirmed that the street has been constructed to meet the city's street design standards. Staff has recommended that the street be accepted. There's a memo included in your packet from Mr. Childs. Happy to answer any questions as well.
Mayor, can we do item 14 and 15 together?
If it's unanimous.
I'd like to make a motion, we adopt a resolution accepting ownership and maintenance of Arbor Green Way and amend the schedule of maximum speed limits as defined in section 70-132 of Code of Ordinance.
Motion seconds, further discussion. Let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Odom.
Alderman Odom?
Yes.
Alderman Best? Yes. Alderman Kinsey? Yes. Mayor Outlaw? Alderman Astor? Yes. Alderwoman Harris? Yes. Alderman Bingle?
Carries. Next item.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 16 is a resolution approving additional streetlights on Racetrack Road. Public Works has requested that the installation of additional streetlights along Racetrack Road, that we evaluated that area, and it does not meet the city's light standard. It's recommended that we have an additional 8 streetlights there with an installation cost of $4,514.10. Monthly utility charge for that service will be $67.52. There's a memo included in your packet from Mr. Bouchard. We're happy to answer any questions.
Board have questions?
No one have any questions? I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution to approve the street lights on Racetrack Road.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's have roll call starting with Alderman Bingle.
Alderman Bingle? Yes. Alderwoman Harris? Yes. Alderman Astor? Mayor Outlaw? Alderman Kinsey? Yes. Alderman Best?
Yes.
Alderman Odom?
Yes.
Motion carries. Appointment starting with Alderman Bingle.
None tonight, sir.
Alderwoman Harris.
Tonight, sir.
Alderman Kinsey. Best.
Yes, I do. I have one.
And to the HPC board, some of you are familiar with Ms. Annette Stone. She was once a planner for the city of New Bern, and she has inquired that she would love to be one of the members of that board. So I would like to make a motion to consider appointing Ms. Annette Stone to the HPC.
Wholeheartedly second that.
Okay, motion second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Motion carries. Do you have any more tonight?
That is it.
Thank you.
Alderman Odom? Attorney's report? City manager's report.
One, the other one that I have is the fire department will be having their assessment for accreditation May 16th through the 18th to determine whether the department will need to go before the accreditation board in July. The board is invited to a meet and greet with the assessors on Sunday, May the 16th at approximately 5 p.m. There will be a notification that will be sent out confirming that at a later date once it gets a little bit more set in stone. But Chief Boyd has invited all the board to attend if you wish to attend whenever the assessors get here. That's all I have, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Mark, since we're on the city manager's report, and I was going to do it on new business, but is there any way that you can give us an update tonight on the FEMA environmental assessment update on Stanley White?
That's a great question. I don't know what the current status is. I'm going to ask Foster to come up here. He may know a little bit closer as to what the status is. He's been working very closely with them. I don't think there's been a ton of movement, but I will let Foster answer.
Good evening, Mayor and Alderman. We have a weekly meeting with FEMA to discuss the environmental assessment. Our next one is this Thursday. So each week we get feedback from FEMA on items they were still requesting from us. So right now we're still going back and forth. In my conversation last week with Chelsea Klein, the FEMA representative, she informed me that definitely sooner than later this is going to be open to public input, which will be a 30-day process where the public will be able to review the complete environmental assessment. They have not decided whether or not they will have a public meeting or not, so that's up to FEMA for that. So that's where we stand right now.
About another month? Yeah, okay.
It's all in FEMA's hands at this point.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is starting with Alderman Odom. Alderman Best.
Yes, I do. I have.
I guess, George, I guess you'd be the point of contact for this, but the state came through, you don't have to come up, but the state came through and trimmed down the tree lines on Highway 55, and they left a lot of debris in the ditches. And I was wondering if, they could come back out, have a crew to clean that stuff up so it won't get caught all up in people's drain pipes and clog the ditch. Thank you. Secondly, I know that we had a meeting with Mr. Jeffrey Jerry and his team about the buyout areas, and it was discussed that North Hills Drive, North Hills Court was going to be taken off of the paving list. Now, considering what I have heard from Ms. Amanda tonight about that Encore and the Rebuild North Carolina program, that's going to be a long, extended-out program. So I'm asking this board if you would reconsider and have, I don't know how it came about of taking them off. I think Matt mentioned it, that they were going to take them off because North Hills Court and North Hills Drive was going to be taken off the paving project because that area was going to potentially be part of the buyout zone. Now, if you go over into that area and you look at that street, you ride down that street, it is unacceptable for the citizens that live over in that area to have to travel on that street in the condition that it's in. So I would like for that street, for those two streets, North Hills Drive and North Hills Court, be put back on the paving list. And if this is something that needs additional action, Mr. Attorney, tonight to get put back on, do I need to make a motion for that, or? Okay. Is there any discussion from any of the board members that feel like you want to?
Question, so that would be under this year's budget or for next year's budget? Was it removed from this year's budget?
It was removed, yes.
Okay, so I think we need to clarify that would be included in this year's budget.
That is correct. It was initially part of it, and it was taken off, and I think because of the buyout, that was the reason why it was.
That's correct. We took it off because we didn't want to pave it and then have it immediately go into a buyout process. And we replaced that road with Main. That was the one of the roads, and we had discussed doing Walt Bellamy. With additional conversation with Jordan Hughes, they have got some utility to work to do on Walt Bellamy, the portion that we're going to pave. So what we decided to do, there's a little more work on Main. We're going to pave that. We can push Walt Bellamy to next year's budget. Mark indicated that there was $400,000, I believe, at least proposed in there. We can we can just move it in the list. It's not that we have eliminated it from paving. So,
Okay.
you know, if it is your desire for us to pave North Hills and just see what falls out with the buyout process, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I would hope so, that we'd be able to accommodate our citizens that live in the area, because we're looking at this buyout program. This is going to be an extended buyout program up to 12 years. And I don't want my residents over there, you know, driving on streets that's unacceptable anywhere else in this city. So, Mr. City Attorney, do I still need to make a motion on this to? Let's do this so that we're all clear. Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Yeah, but before you do that, could we possibly delay that to our budget workshop next week so we can see a street assessment on where that street fell? Obviously, it must have the need since it was identified to be done, but I think it would be beneficial for the board to just look at the streets that's right above that, the streets that's right below that. There may be another street in your wards, for example, that may have a higher need. That's the only reason I'd just like to see that before we made that decision, if that would be okay.
I think if it was already on the list to be paved, and the only reason why that it was pushed back because of a buyout, I think we have sufficient enough information, and I'm sure George can attest to it, that it does need to be paved. And because everyone pays taxes, and, you know, when people pay taxes, they have a right to be able to drive on a road that's conducive to them and their vehicles, because we obviously don't reimburse for repairs on cars. I'll support your motion if you make it, Barbara.
Doing that will, in our current budget format, that will pull Main back off for this year's paving to put back on North Hills and North Hills Court. When we pulled North Hills Court and North Hills, we replaced it with another road on next season's list. So we can juggle it, but just realize that the list we've got now that includes Main, we will drop Main to put North Hills and North Hills Court back on that list. That doesn't mean we're not going to ever pave Main. It just means it's not going to be done in this cycle. It'll probably be done in the next cycle.
Is it?
When will we know about the buyout? When will we actually have confirmation as to, I'm thinking, I mean, if the people down at the very end of that street wanted to buy out, you probably might not have but a half a street with a cul-de-sac in it or something.
I don't know, man. What that time frame is, obviously, as Amanda kind of stated, it's got to go through a process. I mean, obviously, tonight's the first step, is the board approving usage of that area in the buyout program. then it's got to go to the state. The state has to go through their vetting process and get the cooperative agreement. Cooperative agreement have to come back before the board. It'll have to be approved. After that cooperative agreement is established, then they will start the discussions with the individual homeowners, working through their different processes. And basically, then you got legal processes that go along with that, and the actual buyouts and the actual conveyance of properties and things like that. So
12 to 18 months easy, right?
probably pretty good. It'd be hard to estimate. I mean, Jeff's back there kind of shaking his head sideways and up and down, so I don't know which one that means.
Yeah, so again, this is a new program, and this is the very first step in the program. As the city manager stated, there's a lot of other details that need to be worked out. There's a lot more questions that we have asked that we haven't, that the state just doesn't have an answer to yet. But this is the first step. It's identifying those zones. We send them up to the state. They may not accept any of our zones. They may accept one, they may accept two. We don't know that answer yet. After that, then we'll get into the process of contacting and working with the homeowners to determine the buyout and what that looks like. We don't have those details yet, and the state doesn't have those details yet. So again, as the city manager stated, we are in the first stage of a long process at this point in time. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay. In your dealings with these type of projects or whatever, your expertise, you can basically say this project may not even start within another 2 or 3 years.
Preliminarily, we're about 15 months away from even the funding being available.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we put North Hills Drive and North Hills Court back on the paving, the fiscal year 21-22 paving list.
Second.
Motion second on that item.
I'd like a correction to that. It would be the fiscal year 2021, because that's this year's budget. Is that correct? Yes, so it needs to be 2020. I just want to make sure it's in this year's 2021. Yes, ma'am. So I like to make that correction.
Is there further discussion? Let's have a roll call starting with Alderman Bingle.
Alderman Bingle?
Yes.
Alderwoman Harris?
Yes.
Alderman Astor?
Yes.
Mayor Outlaw?
Aye.
Alderman Kinsey?
Yes.
Alderman Best?
Yes.
Alderman Odom?
Okay, anything else on new business?
Yes, I do.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to thank, Matt and his crew for starting the project with the sidewalks. I noticed that they was over on Blades Avenue, cleaning up the sidewalks over there, which was in dire need. So it's a great improvement for our communities, and our citizens are really happy about that. Basically, that's about all I have tonight.
Okay, Alderman Kinsey.
None. Right, sir.
Alderman Astor.
The only thing I'd like to say is we're in the final few days of completing Old Airport Road. They're out there paving as hard as they can. They paved up until about 8 o'clock last night. I'm sure they're probably there now. But George has assured me that within the next day or two that we will be complete with that project, other than some minor striping and stuff like that will have to take place. So thank you, George, for all your help on it.
Okay, Alderwoman Harris.
So I have had constituents who reached out about last Tuesday's meeting in regards to the City Market and Vault Center. Because of that, an email was sent out. You guys were all CC'd. We received a response today, just so the community knows, that they said, thank you for your inquiry. The EDA received the grantee's request and justification for expanding the workforce element of this award. Based upon EDA's review of the approved scope of work and success of the workforce component, the request was approved. EDA regrets that there is a difference of opinion within the board. However, that is viewed as a local issue that is best resolved locally. And I responded back to her requesting the grant officer's contact information and her supervisor's contact information for city residents to reach out in response to that decision. They feel like the CNI was the engagement to utilize for that grant for the Vault Center, and they were not engaged in the scope of work that was changed. With that being said, my concerns that I would like to bring up is that we are 7 people on this board. The city manager serves at the pleasure of the board, which is 7 of us, and he does not serve at the individual pleasure of board members. So moving forward, because I was left out in these meetings, I would appreciate if the city manager is asked to do anything in regards to projects or have meetings. I would like to be CC'd on this so that I'm aware of what's going on. Although I'm the alderwoman for Ward 2, I represent the city holistically, so it's important for me to know what's going on. With that being said, I have a concern that there was a meeting that happened with you, Ms. Sabrina, and a few other board members in regards to the Redevelopment Commission, and I would like to understand the concern that you had in regards to the contract for, so your vision of the redevelopment.
Everybody else.
Okay, so your vision.
Conversation with Redevelopment Commission board members.
Your vision of the Redevelopment Commission was to bring individuals together.
Correct.
That have expertise to follow through with the CNI.
That is correct.
That includes affordable housing.
That is correct.
Okay, so what was your concern in regards to the contract that was being put together for an opportunity?
Because at the meeting, the last meeting we had after Dr. Caldwell's presentation, a question was asked by a board member, is this contract between redevelopment or through development services? And the reply was, it's through development services.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, nobody had any other questions, no comments. I sent an email the next day requesting a meeting for when Dr. Caldwell was here,
Mm-hmm.
and I was denied that. I was told there was no time in his schedule for me to meet him, so I asked then for his itinerary, and I asked for a copy of the contract. When I got the contract was between the Redevelopment Commission, not Development Services.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so that's my question. You've stated in a meeting that it's between Development Services, which then redevelopment shouldn't discuss because it's through Development Services, but yet when I received it, I further found out that that contract was actually signed on March 16th, had never been brought to the attention of the full board for review. So all I'm doing is question. I have no issue with Dr. Caldwell. As you know, I have documentation where we met with Dr. Caldwell on June the 28th. I have the emails that I've sent to Mr. Ruggieri, to Mark Stevens, to Amanda, to Margaret. You were copied on all of those where we requested grant opportunities, information. Your action step was to set up a meeting for Dr. Caldwell to come here. Never heard anything back from that, so I don't know if it was COVID or whatever. That never came through.
He did meet. He met with the Redevelopment Commission.
Well, through Zoom.
Via
I was
Zoom.
at that meeting, but I'm talking about when we had the meeting, the action step that we said in June was to have him come in August, but never heard anything back. I was never,
Well,
copied.
he did come.
Okay, well, then I was not aware of that, even though I have all the documentation from the back and forth, and then I heard about it again at the redevelopment. I just asked questions. Again, I have no problem with Dr. Caldwell. I have a problem with the process.
So there was an error in the contract, and that's going to be rectified tomorrow.
No,
so-
I've got the new contract,
Right.
and I understand that, but the issue is then how come the question was answered as development services the contract was between them and not redevelopment?
So
Where is that? What is that error?
So that would be an answer that Development
Understood.
Services, but there was an error that's going to be rectified. So once it's rectified, this contract is going to be under the redevelopment. What I want to know is, do you have an issue moving forward tomorrow for them voting? Because the redevelopment, from my understanding, has no issue with the contract. The name changes
Well,
will be
who have you
fixed.
talked to on the redevelopment commission?
I've spoken to Maria Cho. I've spoken to.
Yeah, and again, I agree. I'm happy to have a side conversation with you about this because I have talked to them all as well. And it's not that we have an issue, we have an issue with the process. And the process is that, with Dr. Caldwell's itinerary, he's not even meeting with anybody from the Redevelopment Commission based on the itinerary that was sent from me. The other issue is that emails are going to Redevelopment Commission meetings, and my name, your name, Alderman Best's name is not on those emails. We are part of that, and we should be on all emails.
I understand completely.
Okay.
So I think it's important, we have an issue with transparency on this board, and I just think it's important that moving forward, we're here because we're elected. It's not a job that, we applied for. Well, technically we did when we signed our name, but those are, we manage our employees and then we're managed by them. And I just feel, and this is not necessarily directed to you, it's the board as a whole, we lack transparency. Change of scopes happen at the last minute, and then we as board members, whether it's your award or not, citizens come to us and they think it's a whole board situation. I've been as transparent as possible since the 4 years that I've been on this board. I want to make sure that tomorrow people understand how important this deal would be, because it's going to create affordable housing in Duffyfield. And if we do not work together as a team, as a board, then that means everything that we said in regards to affordable housing is not true. And Dr. Caldwell and his staff and the people in the redevelopment have had discussions. I understand that we're ex officios. I've stated from the beginning that I want that board to do what they were appointed to do. I sit on this board and I have to deal with the things of the city, and I support what's needed for the redevelopment. We have to allow them to redevelop. There was a mistake. Everybody has an error. Everybody on this board has made a mistake. That's going to be rectified, hopefully tomorrow, with no issues moving forward. That's my only concern. Another thing is that
I expect everybody to be truthful and upfront, though, just as you want them to be. I think everybody, from aldermen to commission members to staff members. So that's my expectation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And the other situation is, it's been brought to my attention that there's been meetings, or Mark has been advised to, and the city attorney have been advised to figure out how the housing authority could be dismantled and either put under the city or put under the redevelopment. And that is something that I found out not from the board. So that's the issues that I'm having, is that the individuals that serve as the pleasure of the whole board are doing things specifically for certain aldermen, and everybody's not CC'd. So transparency, I'm advising, if you're asked from any board member, I would like to be CC'd on these projects so I know that's what's going on, because that's not fair to me as the alderwoman for my ward, or to be able to make decisions properly, holistically. I appreciate your time, and that's all I have for today.
Alderman Bingle.
Yes, I do have one item that I'd like to have some discussion about this evening, and that's about traffic calming options, and either it's with our police chief, with George. I've been contacted, I had an issue, or we are having an issue, the mayor and I have been contacted by someone on North Craven Street. Of course, we're all aware of the issue they have on 2nd Street, and now I know that Alderman Best has been contacted in the Woodrow area, and they're asking for these speed bumps. And I'm not sure that speed bumps are the answer, so I've had some discussion with the city attorney, who is saying that Durham came up with 7 options for calming. So I don't know if we have any opinions on speed bumps, but my citizen wants a response as to why we're not moving forward with speed bumps on North Craven Street. And I was hoping that maybe we could just get some information, or get in a direction to get some of this information, to have some options for our citizens.
I would like to make this comment. I have been dealing with the young lady over in Woodrow for about 2 years now, and don't think by one chance that I have dismissed and ignored her concerns, because I have contacted the police department when we had Chief Summers in, and I have worked with my police person, and they have put out the what they call it, the spy speeder or something like spy, and they have collected data. So their area, the area that was being spoke of in Woodrow has not been omitted. It has not been put on the back burner. The police department has been out in that area on numerous times trying to eliminate the speeders. And I know one of her concerns was the fact that there was children playing in the streets over there and that she was concerned about the safety of the children. Now, me personally, I'm not for speed bumps within our city, in neighborhoods. That's why we have the police. Police is supposed to police the area. We have speed limits in place. And I didn't think the city was entertaining putting speed bumps in neighborhoods. We were more so on the line of coming up with the four-way stop sign at intersections. So that was my take on it.
But I am being pressured, just as you are, to come up with these solutions and help our citizens understand why we're not going with one option. We had the same thing on Second Street, you know, with the residents complaining there as well. So I guess what I'd like to do is either, if I want to ask the city attorney, city manager, however you want to do this, Public Works, if we could investigate what the options were that Durham had, so we could see what other communities are doing and not reinvent the wheel, what options they're using besides speed bumps, because that's correct, Mr. Davis, they're not using speed bumps, they have other alternatives. And would you all be amenable to get that information?
Yes.
Well, you know, or at some meeting, whatever. I just want to be able to respond to our citizens to tell them what we're doing in lieu of.
Board good with that direction?
Yes.
Everybody good for options? Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else under new business? Yes.
So we kind of discussed with the finance director in regards to the American Rescue Plan. Are we going to have further discussion on ideas, or is this going to be at the May 4th and 5th? Because I have had community members reach out, especially from the Pembroke community, that feel that they need beautification over in that area, and maybe some of the infrastructure dollars can help that process in the Pembroke community. And then the other thing is I hate to bring it up, but I have been getting some complaints about parking in regards to them feeling like they don't have enough time based on the 2-hour parking. I'm just relaying the message. They were hoping it could be considered possibly that maybe the main streets have the 2-hour parking, but the outskirts no longer offer the 2-hour parking.
On Broad Street, there is no parking limit. So Broad Street has none. So it would just.
So what about you know where Middle Street is? Well, obviously, that street.
The 2 blocks, 200 and 300 block of Middle. 300 block would be Chelsea, 200 block would be Captain Ratty's block.
Okay.
So 200 and 300 block. We found that when we went to 3 hours, the employees tend to abuse it. Then they go 3 hours, they come back, they move their car. If you look, and there'll probably be, you could get the statistics, more tickets are given, believe it or not, for parking over the line or in the wrong direction.
They had complaints about that,
I have
too.
got complaints
Oh, my
about
goodness.
that versus the 2 hour. Fewer tickets are given on 2 hours. I have already met with our new police chief, and that was my first discussion that I had with him about parking and reviewing that and looking at how much over the line people are going, you know,
Yes.
with these large trucks, you have a tailgate and it kind of hinges over. Is there a way to kind of massage that? Not sure. So we are having that discussion. But, you know, any city you go to, 2 hours is, you know, the deal is the deal. And we have free parking within a half a block of all of the blocks that people can park all day for free.
So the other question is, because you know, you've mentioned, and they've mentioned too, that it seems like the employees of these restaurants are abusing it. Is
Well,
there any?
all the businesses.
All the businesses. Is there a possibility, I'm sure you probably approached this, but maybe it needs to be revisited, about creating some sort of stamp that says they work as an employee, so if they're there, they need to be, you know, moved out, or.
You know, is that discriminatory? Is that,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, people change cars,
Yeah.
whatever.
It's just
They should know
frustrating.
better. You
Yeah.
know, if we find out that of course, they're getting a $25 ticket, but if we find out that our employees are there, we're like, hey, you can get a ticket and
Yeah.
deal with it.
I just know that they've been frustrated because it's like they want to go get some ice cream, go shopping, and it's like 2 hours, and
But again, you could do all of that and park in half a block and you're there.
I hear you.
When the weather's not bad, when the weather's bad, it's more difficult.
Right.
But again, most people won't walk around for more than 2 hours if it's raining.
Right.
So it all works out.
And just one last thing. I think it's important that, we all have our views, but I think when we're talking about the pandemic and how people are affected by COVID, I think it's kind of insensitive for some people to make the comment that people rather stay home than get a job and sit on unemployment. Some people choose to stay home because they want to be safe. So I think we need to somewhat, as a board, kind of refrain from those statements because we are talking about our citizens and, possibly people that may work for us. I just think we need to kind of be respectful. We don't know people's situations on why they're home or why they're on unemployment. That's it. That's all I have.
Also, Mark, I would like to be CC'd on any change of scopes, plans, or meetings that involves other aldermen, because like Alderman Harris says, we work collectively together for the entire city. And then I also wanted to thank Jeff and Amanda for the outstanding job that they have been doing with Encore and the state on this buyout program. I know that was a very extensive, detailed program, and I'm just glad now that you are able to get some help through Encore and Rebuild North Carolina. So thank you for a well-done job. That's it.
Okay, any other new business? Do we need a closed session tonight?
Yes, sir, Mayor. Closed session pursuant to 143, 31011A6 to discuss a personnel matter. So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Motion carries.